From the heartland of America and the gateway to the West, good morning, good evening, wherever you may be across the nation, around the world. I'm George Norrie. Welcome to Coast AM. Next hour, special reports with reporter Linda Moulton Howe, including UFOs.
We received a phone call from a truck driver named Tim Comstock, and he was really excited to tell us what he had seen just the night before in Empire, Ohio. And on the air, he described a triangle of lights and glowing object below that was rising up to the triangular craft's dark crystalline surface. And Tim took 3 photos of the objects on his cell phone, which I reported in an October 31st Earth Files. And Coast listeners can see that report and tonight's Coast news updates by going to www.earthfiles.com. That is my news website, and click on the hot links at the top of the headlines page. His are, right now, the only photographs in existence, actual photographs of this glowing pod and triangle that you're going to hear more about. Because since that October report from Empire, Ohio, I have received more sighting reports from Ohio residents provoked enough by Tim's photographs at Earth Files to contact me about their own sightings of the triangle and the very strange glowing pod, or cocoon, as Tim described it, rising up into the triangular craft. And I'm going to begin with a security guard that I'll call Sarah, who works in the Stratton and Empire, Ohio region. Sarah is 48 years old, was born and raised in Steubenville, Ohio, north of Empire, and has worked as a security guard the past 11 years. She was very surprised to see Tim Comstock's photographs because back in the first week of August 2008, Sarah was on security duty around midnight when she saw a triangle pattern of lights like the one in Tim's photos. And then again, on October 23rd at 3:45 a.m., while Tim Comstock had slowed his big truck down to about 2 miles an hour on Route 7 south of Empire to watch the amazing lights and snap images on his cell phone, Sarah was maybe 0.3 of a mile further north on old Route 7 watching the exact same phenomenon. Tonight on Coast, Sarah begins with her August sighting of a triangular pattern of lights.
Here it is.
The first time I saw the triangular shape, I was at work, and I was looking at the different stars and everything, and this one section north of the plant, the stars just suddenly just seemed to disappear. As I was watching it, there was these 3 bright, like a yellowish white light that appeared. They were triangular shaped. You couldn't see any form, 3D form to it, but it was 3 lights. And these 3 lights kind of hovered for a while. They would get bright, and then they would have a little bit of orange mixed into them. And then it moved up, straight up in the sky. Then it moved towards the east, and it stopped, and it started to go north, and then it kind of zigzagged from west to east, and then it took off straight up. It was almost faster than your eyes could follow it.
Do you remember the date in August?
I believe it was like the 5th or the 6th, right around midnight. But at that time in August, it did not have the 3D pod under it. And there was one person that was working that night that said that they had seen something, but they were up a little bit further north than where I was. And they said that they saw something that blocked out the stars, and there was bright lights.
Sarah didn't talk to anyone else about the early August sighting of the triangle pattern of lights that moved so strangely. But 3 months later, at 3:45 a.m. on October 23rd, 2008, not only was she seeing the triangle pattern of round lights again, but rising below the triangular aircraft was a mysterious, large, orange-yellow glowing object that she refers to as a pod, a 3D pod. Truck driver Tim Comstock felt the rising, glowing object was somehow alive and organic and called it a cocoon. Tim could not stop his truck and never saw what happened when the glowing cocoon or pod reached the triangle of lights. But Sarah did, and now continues her description of what happened after she again saw stars disappearing in the sky.
I was doing a patrol down at our abandoned Toronto plant, I was coming northbound on Old Route 7, looking at the sky, and I noticed that the stars were disappearing. I pulled off the side of the road, and I noticed these 3 really bright lights. They were circular shaped, and they were almost like looking into a spotlight. There was 3 of them. They formed like a triangular shape, and it just hovered above the trees. And there was this pod, like a 3D pod shape, that was a bright yellowish orange that was raising up from like the trees, went up towards the triangular-shaped object. The closer it got, the more you could see that there was a bottom between the 3 bright circular lights. And it was like a dark charcoal gray to a black, and it had a real rough texture, like aluminum foil crumpled up and you straighten it up.
So kind of a crystalline, crinkly surface.
Yes.
I wonder if you could describe the pod as you're looking at it a little more and what exactly you're seeing and what happens as it rises toward the triangular configuration of lights.
The bottom of it almost looked like if you were looking at the bottom of a boat. The oval, but yet it has a ridge through the middle of it. Mm-hmm. It kind of looked like that, and then it almost like squared off going further up. And from the way I was looking at it, it looked almost like a bright yellowish orange in color.
And how far do you think that you were from that rising cocoon or pod in relationship to where Tim Comstock was?
From there, I was probably 0.3 of a mile further north than what he was. The 3D pod kept raising up. I never saw an opening in the bottom of the craft, but it was like as the pod got closer, it was like the craft kind of like sucked it in, or I can't explain. It was like the pod just suddenly disappeared. And then the bright lights, they hovered there for a few minutes, and then they just shot up.
Sarah said the object in the sky appeared larger than a full moon. Another surprising discovery after I posted my Earth Files news report about Tim Comstock's photos came from Midvale, Ohio, about an hour's drive west of Empire. Midvale is in Tuscarawas County and has a population of about 550. One young resident there is 22 years old, recently married, and goes by the nickname Joy. Joy has insomnia and is often up after midnight, as she was in the early morning hours of Sunday, November 2nd, 2008.
The last time I looked at the clock, it was 2:33 a.m. on November 2nd. I'm usually up late watching TV. I decided to go over and have a cigarette, which I always sit at the desk to do, beside the window. And something caught my eye out the window, and I looked out to see a very large, orangish, yellowish, whitish orb, for lack of a better word. It didn't seem to keep one shape. I saw it at the edge of the tree line behind my house.
And when you say it didn't keep a shape, can you explain that?
It just seemed to kind of waver around.
In your email to me, you described it as watching an amoeba.
Yes. It looked like as if you were looking under a microscope, the little blobs that you see, how they sort of just wiggle around.
So this was glowing, but it was changing shape rapidly.
Yes.
And it was rising at the same time?
It moved horizontally and was changing shape, but it wasn't like going up or down. It was just following a straight line through the tree line. Then it dipped down behind the trees, and when it did that, I could see the silhouette of the trees in front of it, but I could not see the trees behind it, as if it were solid. After that, it hung in the air in the same spot for probably less than 30 seconds, moved backwards and upwards a little bit, then a lot more rapidly than it had been moving. It moved forward, but further away from me, and up, way higher than the tree line. Right away, I called a friend who lives on the next road over and asked her if anything was going on. She said there was something behind her house, over the wooded area that's right behind our first road in town.
Is she the neighbor who said her dog was going crazy?
Yes.
Could you hear animals around your area?
Yes, they were going absolutely crazy.
From your perspective, this glowing amoeba-changing object rose up to a triangular pattern of whitish lights in the sky and disappeared?
Yes. It reached it, and it hung there for a few moments, and then all the lights went out as if somebody just flipped a switch and turned them off.